It is the return of that mysterious man. The ancient and mystical Kekway, who we actually now know is MarineLord. That's right. We've got one hell of a game that we're ahead of us right now. MarineLord as Abbasid Dynasty up against the Viper once again as China. I'll give it a Viper, man. When he wants to train on a Civ, he commits. I mean, this man's been non-stop on the China grind. So expect some high-level performance out of the China Civ in this matchup. Both of them, of course, with that eco capabilities. As we've seen Abbasid Dynasty, that double TC boom timing is just super effective with the eco wings. And we'll have to see if that's the route we go, or if we're going to have a very bloody, messy opening to this game. Either way, I see potential for both sides. Of course, we've seen China, the way you can kind of utilize them early. Something that doesn't get talked about as much is the Palace Guard spam in the early game. I feel like a lot of people who've been trying to make China work and been saying they're kind of worthless and pointless have this overfixation on Spearmen into Nesta Bees and Springwalds, and that's kind of all they do. Of course, when we've been watching Viper, what we've seen more of is this prioritization on getting your hands on maybe Palace Guard, Crossbowmen, actually reacting to what opponent does. And by the way, I think that's something big to kind of highlight, something that makes Viper really like a lethal opponent so often whenever we watch him, is he's incredibly good at transitioning. He's incredibly good at countering his opponent. These are two factors that I think people don't necessarily handle as well in the other games we've watched. We've seen plenty of top 100 ELO leaderboard players who they'll start producing into Spearmen, and they'll never stop producing into Spearmen. Or they'll start producing Horsemen, and they just Zerg Horsemen until they feel like they can cheesily win. And sometimes it works, but against good players it doesn't, because good players identify, aren't folded under the pressure instantly and are able to actually find the immediate counter, right? Where you're, oh, okay, so you're going to Horseman, I'm going to start bringing out the Spearman. Oh, okay, you know, you've gone in to like clumped infantry mass, I'm going to bring out the Mangonels. This is what dictates high-level players right now. And the reason Viper is always able to do this, and it's going to be interesting to see if it happens in this game as well, is because one thing I always think Viper is incredibly good at, and in a lot of ways actually ahead of plenty of his opponents, is scouting, is vision. His vision control on the map, the way he denies his opponent as well as gets his own vision, has time and time again given him the edge in these matchups we've seen in these 1v1s. So it's going to be fun to see against MarineLord, a guy who's incredibly good himself at like prioritizing that scout vision, as well as his micro capabilities in these fights we've seen time and time again whenever we watch Kekway, aka MarineLord. It's going to be interesting to see which thing gives the edge and who's better at reacting to what's coming, right? Opening-wise, Viper already on his way to constructing his Bark in the Sun, and we can already see that MarineLord has matched him with the teching up, and he's going into the Eco Wing. I feel like we always see this. The only time I've not seen Eco Wing in a high-level game was against another Abbasid player, where it was Military Wing to try and just to get an immediate aggression. But for good reason, you always go Eco Wing. The fresh food stuffs alone would have been good justification, right? The reduced cost on villages, saving yourself 25 food per. But also things like the agriculture gives you the wonderful transition into farmlands if you have to play a tight economy. And then, of course, later on, just getting your hands on the improved processing as you get into that in-page is kind of nutty for that late game booming as well. Will be put down by Viper, but not before Keck sneaks in. And this is the kind of thing, right? This is what we're talking about how he's pretty effective at controlling the flow of vision in the map. He's too late to actually stop MarineLord from getting through here, but the idea is nice, right, in principle, is that he sees these small choke points, and although it's a villager taking time out of his day to build up these structures, it means that his opponent can't go for any sort of quick flank rush. At the same time, he can't easily just move in and out and keep maintaining a vision. It's going to funnel in the scouts, and the importance of that is if you start sniping that scouts, your opponent goes naked in terms of vision. So tech up complete first by Viper. That's always going to be the case, remember, because you are talking about the fixed time of the Abbasid Dynasty. It's kind of the gift and the curse, right? Is that they can't speed up their tech up, but they don't have to invest workers into teching up as well, which is why usually Abbasid Dynasty tends to be one of the most effective civs at getting that quick second TC. In fact, we might see it very soon if MarineLord has 3 people in the stone outcropping right now. Another cool eco detail is the way that Viper keeps utilizing these Bark in the Suns. I feel like too often I see a Bark in the Sun built super close to the base, and then after it's built, your workers just go back to the sheep line or they go to the wood line nearby. Notice the frequent thing that Viper likes to do with these Bark in the Suns is he places them towards the enemy base, fairly far out from his own TC, more or less in a kind of cocky, confident fashion of like, I don't need to be that defensive. And more importantly, I am now securing these resources further out from my base, which is why I also love these palisades. It's all about funnel pointing towards the Balcony of the Sun. So a small army will never get through quickly and will die off or be incredibly weak if it gets past. So now not only does he have the deers, which are great to gather from, but he's got this nearby gold vein. He also covers his wood line still, and there's only this kind of exposed side on the east side, which, by the way, the palisades have been put up on one of these choke points, which only leaves one easy opening into Viper's base. But it's a wide wrap that would easily be spotted if you tried it. I guess the other thing to highlight, by the way, is if you're sticking your Barb in the Sun here, you know, where can you expand all your military and everything else, right? Where can you safely build up more buildings? Whereas because he's went more aggressive with the Barb in the Sun, he now has all this real estate to just sell off to, you know, land appropriators who want to build up nice, big, high-rise apartments, houses, and build wonderful military infrastructure to get out your, you know, your spearmen or maybe your clock tower, whatever else, right? That's the importance of using the Barbican in the Sun well. That's the importance of when you go for these defensive landmarks, of understanding that while the word defensive is in there, it doesn't mean it has to be treated like an extension to your main house in the town center. Second TC, expanded on the right side here, MarineLord. This one fairly far out. It's not going to be the quickest construction. He only sent 5 workers over, and it was a long run. But this does mean he's going to expand similarly to that notion of what we're talking about with Viper done, where he's given himself influence over a giant chunk of new resources with his wood line immediately here, as well as the deer and the berry bushes, which, remember, if he builds a mill nearby, will upgrade as he's the Abbasid dynasty. Just nice mirror movements in terms of how they're doing this. I mean, obviously, this is a TC compared to the landmark, but the end goal is the same, right? It's that expansion of influence over a resource area. Is continuing to come out. How far off is he? Okay, so one more. Yeah, so that'll be his Golden Age. So Golden Age Tech 1 achieved, which means he's got that 10% extra gather rate on all resources. This is where Viper could potentially fall behind a bit, which is why Viper isn't going for a second TC, but it does look like he's going to go for a quick tech-free timing. So no interest in hanging around the second age, and I appreciate what he's doing here. I feel too often people hang around the second age when they're against another eco-booming faction. One that can potentially exceed you and will in this case. So his play is more about getting access to the clock tower quickly and then potentially putting out a small military force that can go and pressure in to MarineLord's base where he currently is being incredibly greedy. Info that Viper, as you can see, does have, because he's got this scout running back and forth around. So he knows about this TC. He knows about the lack of military. This is all what we were talking about early on in the game, right? The critical point of gathering information and how much easier it is, in fact, for Viper to do that, right? If you think about MarineLord, he had this one choke point to go in, and that's literally it. I'm still surprised that didn't get walled off to some extent. But it's very hard for MarineLord to get in on certain areas and get the info. While he sees it now on the retreat, it may be a little bit too late. And he's going to feel the pressure coming towards his base quickly, as the tech up is almost complete. Meanwhile, when we look at MarineLord, he still doesn't have the resources, and he's unlikely to build a military force right now before he begins researching into the Castle Age, which gives a window for Viper to pressure him. Window that we might be seeing in just a sec. So needs to get the wood supplies up. Gold is really good right now. He's got 9 people working that. Only 7 on the wood line. Didn't even get the forestry. I'd be interested to know, like, pros' thoughts on this. I wonder how long forestry takes to pay for itself, because I'm trying to think how many hits usually a tree takes. I feel like it's a good chunk, right? 4 or 5, maybe. So just getting it that much quicker with the forestry, I feel like that has to pay for itself within 10 minutes, right? It's only 25 food and 50 gold. There you go. MarineLord, while the castle up is underway, he's going to go for the double racks drop, and he's getting the outpost down, so he understands that he's going to need to turtle efficiently. Palace Guard's starting to be spammed out. No siege weapons out just yet, but Spring Walls are being produced by Viper. And Palace Guard just disrupting the back line. Sees the stone outcropping as well, so it's going to force him off it. He doesn't actually have to attack him. He can just stand here, and that's good enough. So he's going to start burning the structure. He tries to interrupt the third racks getting dropped. Nicely done by him. Remember, if you get up to 3 racks, you'll match the rate at which Viper can push out, because, look, the Imperial official has come out to this barracks, so he is increasing production by 200%, which is why the Palace Guard, rather, takes 7 seconds to produce when they should be taking 22. Pressure back and forth. Just trying to stop this second outpost going down. I like this move, by the way. You're going to get a little bit of harassment for the outpost, but you clearly know your opponent wants to double up this vein, right? He actually wants to get huge value so he can expand and support one of those more pricey kind of armies, whether it's keeping man-at-arms production up or going into some sort of cavalry. So even if you lose his Palace Guard one by one, it's the fact you're slowing your opponent's eco and yours keeps plowing up, right? That's your goal here. And some AFK villages here. Ooh, okay. Something to be careful of for MarineLord here. He's up to 14 villages here, which means he does have exposed economy, even when fully garrisoned in the TC now. So may want to consider like if he'll need an outpost as time goes on. But right now the pressure is just on these racks, which, by the way, no commitment still. MarineLord doesn't feel confident about trying to field a military force right now. And I don't disagree with this. He needs to actually find a way to get rid of the clock tower sprinklers before he can actually field an army. Otherwise, as you push these out, they're just going to be killed off one by one. That being said, with the arrival on Castle Age, this should be where we start to see man-at-arms come out. Let's see. Yep, man-at-arms being produced in all three of them. Still outnumbered on the Palace Guard front, though. So the front line can hold, and it's going to be very hard to access these sprinklers still. And you're going to lose one of these racks at this rate for sure. Once again, the villager line has been harassed. Viper just on point again with the way he keeps pressuring here. And he's just going to keep booming his own base, right, kind of unpressured. And he knows he needs to apply this pressure because his opponent has these two TCs. He can't just sit back and try and, you know, build up a big clump army before going in. Racks. Wonderful. Man-at-arms production has stopped right now. MarineLord's just kind of stalled. There it is. Okay, I was about to say, he just didn't have the resources. So he sells a bunch of food so he can now afford man-at-arms again. But now the Palace Guard is going to move across to the gold line. This is important. Choke him out. Because you have to understand, right, like, the food's running out at the back. He's kind of struggling. Hasn't transitioned in that regard. The expansion is going to keep working, but this is the only place that MarineLord is getting gold right now. So going after other resources, he can diversify, right? He can get them elsewhere. But right now, this is the sole gold vein being utilized. And when you see a second gold vein nearby, unless you've been screwed by the map siege gods, you as Viper have to assume that if you control this area of his base, you control more or less his ability to tech up or go for quality units. And more importantly, you ensure he can never go into sprinklers himself. Something that you as the Abbasid dynasty can do, but without a workshop, right? You can build in these sprinklers on the field. So, wins the bout again. Sprinklers really being the difference here. So remember, man-at-arms against man-at-arms is a very slow battle. Nothing quick about it. And once again, Sprinklers will just continue to snipe out these man-at-arms. Villagers trying to move out right now, but the outpost is being burnt. They're going to try and keep it up and repaired. Problem is, this means the Sprinklers can now start sniping out your eco directly, and this is going to be worthwhile for Viper. Forcing them back. Still 5 villagers left here, so he could continue to burn it. It is decent repairs out. It will delay this for MarineLord, but MarineLord understands he needs more infrastructure here. So he builds 2 more barracks behind the TC because he needs to actually get man-at-arms at a quantity that outnumbers his opponent, who, remember, as we said, even with just 3, is matching your production out of 1 racks courtesy of that Imperial official. So, outpost gets burned. Villagers try to move out. They know they're pretty much dead, so they try to take a Sprinkle with them. Won't be able to do so, though. Too tanky with that 300 health ball. Final village will be sniped down. And now he can continue to pressure in a little bit here. So Philly production will continue right now. MarineLord at 42. That definitely put a burner on him because look at the difference now. Viper catching up, only 3 villages behind. And remember, this is all off the back of 1 TC. Viper never went for a second one. Meanwhile, MarineLord did expand out to the side. And this eco line is getting too big. You can see it now, 20 workers, which means if you shift across, if you apply pressure elsewhere as Viper, you will obliterate his economy. The problem he has right now is he's choosing, do I go for the village line or do I take out the military infrastructure? Because if he allows MarineLord to build up a military force, then he will end up losing this trickle-in, right? Because he's got only 1 racks producing. Meanwhile, his opponent is up to 4 racks. And if he can consistently push out of all of those, then Viper's advantage will start to just kind of fizzle away. And this is why, yeah, we just see Sprinkles all the time, right? Sprinkles is just such a core concept of gameplay right now. It's definitely going to get tweaked. I think when it gets tweaked, I hope they give some sort of other buff to the Chinese. Because I think a big part of what's making Chinese valid, and we've seen this time and time again with Viper, is the clock tower Sprinkles. It's the extra health. It makes them a more efficient investment, right? 200 health compared to the 300. It's so much harder to get through them. Like, outside of Russ in a late game situation, it's hard to think of any Civ that can directly compete with China on a siege weapon basis. Yeah, you can see it now, right? He gets a 1 hit out of the Sprinkle and then has to retreat, because if he hung around, he'd instantly be dead. And Viper needs to be careful with these Springles himself. He did bring out some villagers. I love this. Remember, these are pricey investments. You don't want to lose them too easily. And by the way, the other reason that this kind of combo is so strong for China, and why I think it's going to hurt them much if it gets nerfed, is remember that the astronomical clock tower produces Springles 3 times quicker, I believe it is. Yeah, every 10 seconds, right? It costs the same price, but every 10 seconds you get Springled. And it has 50% more health. And also, the other thing that I think everyone always overlooks when you consider the siege meta that we're in, cavalry/siege meta, is look how pricey siege workshops are. 300 wood. Both these factions save money in that regards, right? So when you're China, it's your landmark building, so you save wood there. And if you're playing as the Abbasid Dynasty, of course, you can build them out in the field. Speaking of Abbasid Dynasty, they're ready to make the move. He doesn't want to lose the secondary TC, and when a ram is built, he knows he has to commit to a fight. He definitely has the number advantage. The Springles are starting to snipe them out one by one, but the village line will just push in and look to bring down the siege weapons. No longer under siege, they're able to actually counterattack. And that'll force Viper to back off. Pricey loss for him as the villagers continue to chase, but these Springles are fairly quick. 1 movement speed compared to the villagers at 1.12, and he's trying to just block them off and slow them down, but won't be able to do so. So he will eventually lose these Springles out. But how far can you chase if you're MarineLord here? And how many villagers could you potentially lose on the retreat? Because there's a few Palace Guard here willing away at you, and with more Springles being built, you will lose a few villagers in the retreat, which means MarineLord now sitting at 51 compared to Viper up at 46, so he's keeping the gap closed. Really impressive from Viper. This early military pressure is actually paying off, in my opinion, when you consider especially that he's still only 1 TC this entire time. And now, high ground. I like this move. This is really cool. So remember, high ground, well, it doesn't give attack advantage, it gives vision advantage, and just a natural choke point, right? So if your opponent gets caught on the low side, you can snipe him out. If he pivots off this high point and then pushes in on the TC, I think he has a vastly better chance of sniping out MarineLord's economy compared to last time. This move into the base was nice, right? It slowed down MarineLord's scaling, it got rid of his gold supplies, he still doesn't actually put people back on that. It definitely had some effect, but now he needs to get rid of the second TC expansion. He's allowed this for way too long. This is why MarineLord was able to field that huge amount of man-at-arms seemingly out of nowhere. Especially when you consider, right, he needed that additional wood line because, well, without 150 wood per, he wouldn't have been able to field, I think it was total 5 barracks he built, so pricey. 750 wood spent just getting your infrastructure, right? Spring was pushing in. Forces out the garrison. Second wood line produced by MarineLord in a more defensive, tilted location. His food line is exposed, though. Scout will scout out what's going on in the main base. And he sees this. Look how much is on the gold. So MarineLord's trying to look for a quick tech up now. This could be Springle play, but he has no one on wood, which suggests to me that this is more about him just getting his hands on a quick age timing, understanding that Viper, at this stage, has invested consistently, constantly, in fact, never-ending, right, to the point where he doesn't have the economy to potentially be booming up. So he understands that his opponent, the Chinese player here, is so invested in his castle age aggression that if he can drag this out, he can get a technological advantage. He can then get into these elite man-at-arms. He can potentially then go into cavalry. And that is when Viper's game gets vastly inferior in comparison to what the Abbasid Dynasty can do at the 30-minute timing. Let's wrap around now. Really needs to snipe out. I wouldn't mind seeing a Nesta Bees, really. A Nesta Bees could have been decent. I think a lot of people think Nesta Bees are worthless right now, though, because I believe they're bugged still. Not as bad as they were. Some people think their damage is a lot lower than it should be. I don't think they are, like, OP strong. They can be viable, though. It's just the quantity you need, I think, makes the problem, right? If your opponent starts building Springles and you continue to build Nesta Bees, that means you're giving up your Springle advantage. And that's why the Springle meta is so kind of damaging to the long term of the current, like, game state. Is you can talk about cavalry in the early game, you can talk about all these different things, but the end game, right, when we're talking 40 minutes games, it's always Springles that decide it. Who has more Springles? And that's why you don't see these Chinese players stop off Nesta Bees. Nesta Bees that are 50% more pricey and don't counter out the Springles that your opponent is producing. Springles continue their slow siege. Decent amount of man-at-arms here, but remember, this is a slow static unit. Usually, I say if you want to counter out Springles, you really need to have Horsemen. The problem he has with producing Horsemen in this situation is there's a decent chunk of Palace Guard and Crossbowmen, which, by the way, in my opinion, one of the best ways to deal with Horsemen is to just kind of amass kind of, shoulder type, heavy build shoulder type infantry that can stand the line and then just have crossbowmen backing it up. I find you actually get through the horsemen surprisingly quick, actually, as they get that bonus versus heavy, right? So really, this composition counters out the potential to go horseman for MarineLord. That being said, he is now building into stables, so he's going for the Lancers, and I like this much better. Although the crossbowmen do counter you out, at least, in terms of getting locked in melee with the Palace Guard, you'll be able to trade. Because remember, the horsemen suck at melee up against other melee. And I do agree with what you're saying, chat. Like, in terms of how this works out right now, like, Springald's definitely powerful with civs that can boost them, but I feel like even when you're not a civ that can boost them, if you're not playing the Springalds, it's very hard to win the game. Because essentially it becomes a stagnant stalemate, right? The only way you then beat a Springald army is situationally on things like Dry Arabia, where you have flanking room. This is a decent map for flanking room, but he'll never get it because of the aforementioned like walling that Viper done early on, right? And how Viper has maintained scouting vision and the way he's expanded his small eco pocket so that he sees any heavy flank attempt. That being said, was this a misclick by Viper? I feel like this scout shouldn't be on the low ground, so he's not going to spot this out. Look at this from MarineLord. He's going to sneak in on an eco line here. It's not going to be quick, though, so he will not be able to get all of this economy. That being said, Lancers reveal their hand a little bit early here as they're going towards the TC. Diving in deep. Now the man-at-arms trying to move across, but the Springalds now have the advantage in this ground here. Remember, the Bargain Sun nearby means that MarineLord cannot dive this. It costs him too many of his troops to try and do. The crossbowmen chasing, so many of them now, up to 13. Viper with this counter. This is what we talked about so early on. This is what he's so good at. He pivots and he transitions incredibly fast. He makes sure that what his opponent is doing right now doesn't work in 2 minutes' time. It's something that has won him so many games and is starting to win him this one. And MarineLord, the quick walling. He's blocking off the retreat point. Oh my god, is this going to work? Are we finally going to see some good quick walling? Maybe. You lose a few villagers for this, but he's just getting enough of these walls built. It's slowing down the retreat. MarineLord will get out in the end, but that was too close for comfort because if he got trapped in there and he loses this entire force, he has nothing left. That's his entire military right now. And keep in mind, he's in the middle of transitioning his food supplies, right? He's starting to build these farms, but he's ran out of berry bushes, he's ran out of deer. So this would have been a very, very, very fragile point in the game that could have been exploited by Viper. Now Viper, big mistake made with the Springalds. He has to retreat them away, so Mike, one of them sniped out by MarineLord's one. And they just keep kind of bugging out. He's trying, so what he's trying to do, he's trying to micro them so they shift formation, because sometimes when you turn formation, your units move quicker. Keep that in mind, guys. Like, when they're in a line and you click right to left, there's this weird pivot where to try and get in position in the formation, sometimes units move quicker. We've seen it plenty of times with villagers. We've seen it with Springalds. It's very inconsistent, though, so on a high level, it's not always going to work. But it's better than just trying to roll them back slowly against the man-at-arms army. Speaking of which, man-at-arms are now engaged with the Palace Guard, but the crossbowmen will win this out, remember. So, MarineLord once again forced to just back away. Springald advantage still sitting with Viper. And MarineLord in a bit of trouble. Wait, this was incredibly greedy. MarineLord tried to do a trip TC. Knowing that pressure was coming, it's because when he pushed across those man-at-arms, he felt confident like he had full control of the game. But then we saw that pivot based on this almost dire walling-in situation, right? They completely switched this game around, and now with the battering rams being built, Viper is the one favored here because he's got all this exposed economy he can exploit now. And he'll send a battering ram in. He's got villagers heading over to start building up the keep. Is he building a secondary army? I don't think you have to diversify your army necessarily because it's risky, but I love this play by him to try and get a keep down. This is why Viper is a keeper in terms of all his gameplay and in terms of the way he plays China, right? This is how we see China thrive so often. The quicker build speed on these structures is incredibly lethal if you can box in your opponent with aggressive keeps. In fact, I feel like they're the only civ I so consistently see aggressively keep. And remember, by the way, this keep especially has additional value. We talked about the fact that this is where your 2 gold veins are right now. And when you see that your opponent went for this 4th gold vein in the center, if you control both these areas, you're going to completely just starve MarineLord out. He's not going to be able to get gold resource. So he forced him to fight. There's the horseman spam. We said about this transition, right? Against the crossbowman, it's not bad. You have to get through the Palace Guard every time, and he does exactly that. The keep, he's going to be able to construct this. The horsemen aren't going to be quick enough. So then they can just garrison the rest of the troops here. So keep is going to be complete. In the meantime, the ram did get rid of the TC. Garrison will begin. Gets all the villagers in and the crossbowmen as well. And now you're in a little bit of trouble. You need to retreat past this. Oh, and where are the troops being rebuilt? Viper, has he got any coming out right now? It's just more crossbowmen right now. He went for a second TC now, but there's been no additional military infrastructure right now. So his eco is going to be heavily exposed at this stage after losing that army. That being said, look at this. He pulls out the crossbow and he moves in with the battering rams. And straight away under the gold line as well. Because Viper needed this expansion, right? Like, he doesn't want to take this gold vein here because that's the backup gold if you ever end up on the back foot, right? You want to be able to expand these center ones and take that resource away from MarineLord, knowing that he's hurting on that front. It's why he's went Horsemen instead of Lancers. It's not just the quicker production speed, it's the fact that MarineLord is running out of places to mine. Horsemen continue to harass. Spearmen now being pushed out by Viper. They are quite quick to come out, but they're not quick to move. And remember, the Horsemen, these light cavalry, they are the fastest moving unit in the game. 1.88 movement speed. The only thing that matches that is a bugged out TC from the Mongols. So chases in again. TC's already been max garrison, so no point pulling people off the village line. So this should be the death of the Horsemen. They might get 1 or 2 more villages for the trouble before dying, but they are going to go down. Meanwhile, the battering rams, barely alive, will stay alive though. The Horsemen were able to snipe out the crossbowmen, but not these battering rams, and now you can repair them and use them. That's going to be a lot of wood saved, remember, as these do cost 300 wood each. We're getting close to that situation, right? Like, you can see the pressure now again. Viper going to find another exposed eco line. Because, remember, Viper, he had all this split economy, right? He didn't kind of cluster in. He didn't protect it. If you look at the comparison, look at the way that MarineLord has built. His economy isn't easily exposed anymore. Because of all that early pressure, he learned at an early age that he shouldn't make loose pockets, right? I think we've got one down here on the stone outcropping, and that's kind of it. The rest of them are not loose pockets at all. They're protected by outposts. They're protected by military infrastructure. Meanwhile, you know, Viper is all about how can I hop from one little location to another. I mean, even when you've got the Barbican Sun here, having a farmland area up here for the maximum efficiency after you used it for Deerland is kind of a greedy play in some regards. So 3 horsemen are almost done there, and that'll be the end of the eco-harassment at that stage. MarineLord, in the meantime, will have rebuilt his army in his base. You can already see he's starting to get battering rams as well. Needs to address these keeps, needs to address them now. Meanwhile, Viper, where's your military force? The problem I have with what Viper's done here is he had to invest in so many spearmen to counter out the horseman charges. It means that this built up enough time that now, with MarineLord re-establishing control of his men-at-arms army, he has the advantage in the melee bout now. So, gold line exposed, going to lose those. Meanwhile, on the west side, it looks like the horsemen push through as well. And Viper, just where is your military? Was it all back in his base this whole time? I feel like he's had barely any military presence for so long now. It seems like this horseman harassment was super effective, and now MarineLord, he can once again plow through because remember, while there are walls here and there, it's not a complete enclosure. It's not completely protected, and that's why these fast-moving horsemen don't care about the occasional fire coming their way. They'll ride deep again. Around the side, Palisades going to be burnt down as well, which will give him access on this side. And it's all crumbling right now for Viper. This double keep play was genius, but everything after that has left a question mark in my mind and a question mark on this game. Like, what is your move? No additional military infrastructure coming out. He doesn't have the food to support this. Look at the income per minute. Look at the ridiculous difference here. We're getting close to a 5x on food income from MarineLord to Viper. And it's made the difference here as he's continued to throw out cannon fodder type units in the horsemen, which are pricey at 100 food each, and his opponent can't even match that with a quantity of spears, which cost 40 food less for each. I'll tell you what, guys, actually, in logical economy standards, can we just point out how much of a bargain it is to get a horse for less than the cost of a man? You know, 40 food for one, 60 for the other? Damn. I mean, that horse is much bigger than a rider. Whew. From an economy standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. You know, from a logical real-world one, anyway. And Viper will feel like not much of this game makes sense. Is Horseman just OP? Or was there something he could have played better? As these Spearmen will not be able to hold this back. Yes, they're a Horseman, but with the man-at-arms as well is at a distinct disadvantage. And once the Spearmen fall, keys to the base are going to be achieved from MarineLord. pulled out posts as well to stop any sort of expanding eco, as well as protect these relics from being picked up. Because he understands right now, Viper, the reason there's no more army, it's not just the food anymore, it's the gold. Viper put himself in a situation where he couldn't transition, right? He couldn't go for Horseman himself. He didn't have the infrastructure. He doesn't want to keep building Spearmen. They're worthless in these fights. And Archers, that feels just kind of backwards thinking when there's already Horsemen on the field. And that's really been the difference. He can barely afford these crossbowmen sitting at 60 gold, 63 to be specific, because that number has barely moved in a lifetime, it feels like. And with more or less your whole economy dead, I think Viper, like, yeah, you got 78 villagers, but none of them are working. They're always just garrisoned inside. It's a long but slow siege, and MarineLord will not let up. He will not let you use any of this land and exploit it for resources. And they're just dying in mass right now. I think Viper's given up at this stage. He's not even trying to get them to safety a lot of the time. He's just having to put out way too many fires across the map. The keeps aren't even effective anymore, and that will be the GG call coming out of Viper. As MarineLord, he hunkers down, he turtles well, he bides his time, and with that patience, he takes the game.